Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Preacher Boys podcast. My name is Eric Skwarczynski. I am a former religious fundamentalist who exposes abuse and other dark elements within the church from the pulpit to the pew. And today's episode, while it doesn't happen within a religious context, all of the parallels in this story can't be ignored. You've got a powerful producer, media mogul like a Harvey Weinstein, and you've got a ton of people rushing to defend him. And if you look at the things that are being said all across the board, it looks identical to some of the stories I cover of a large megachurch pastor falling from grace and the way that people rally around them and start defending them and even questioning things like cancel culture and other elements as being the real reason why they are facing the consequences for their actions. Now, today we're going to be talking about Harvey Weinstein, and I'm sure anybody who's listening to a podcast like this knows who Harvey Weinstein is. And actually, I've talked about this former film producer, Harvey Weinstein, before on this very podcast. I shared an excerpt of my conversation with actress Laura Cayouette, who's been in films like Django Unchained and so many others. And we discussed her reaction to seeing Harvey Weinstein hauled away in handcuffs and talked a little bit about just Hollywood and the way that it views people like him. And she actually used the verbiage, which I thought was very appropriate, that when he was arrested, it was like seeing God taken away in handcuffs. And again, those religious parallels just can't be ignored, can they?
When the Harvey thing happened, you have to imagine that for somebody like me, it was like I woke up, turned on the TV, and God was in handcuffs. He was the most powerful person in that entire city, industry. I mean, he was it. He was the guy, and he was in handcuffs. And it separated me from myself. Like I had an odd out-of-body experience of like, what is happening? Is this real? Like, is that real? You know, like I'm looking at the TV going, huh?
I want to encourage you to check out that conversation with Laura Cayouette if you haven't already. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into this conversation. The reason this showed up on my radar is that I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw a side-by-side of Candace Owens and Harvey Weinstein in an interview. And my immediate thought was that it was a meme page that was like stitching these two things together. And then I clicked on it. It was a very real conversation between Candace Owens and Harvey Weinstein. And then I thought, okay, I'm not a Candace Owens fan, but maybe she's going for this like hard-hitting first interview with him in prison, and she's going to push him on, you know, all of these elaborate stories he's shared in the past to kind of, you know, overcome these allegations. And then I went to the full YouTube video, and this is kind of just a PR puff piece for Weinstein. Like Candace doesn't really push on anything in this conversation. And on the contrary, Weinstein's thanking her for helping him protect his image.
People would say my complaint is, you know what I mean? You know, okay, I'm getting emotional. Everyone deserves a fair trial. Media doesn't favor me, but thanks to you, Candace, there's a voice out there, and Joe Rogan, and uses every opportunity, the mainstream media, to discredit me.
So today I want to talk about Candace Owens' interview with Weinstein. I want to talk about Rogan's really sophomoric response. And then I want to go to a clip from 2011 that kind of shows the way that this sort of thing has been brushed off for decades. So Candace Owens did this interview with Weinstein in prison. It was essentially his first interview, I believe, in 8 years. And he was calling in from the prison to her show. I watched the segment that was released on YouTube. The rest is behind a paywall. I'd rather not give Candace Owens my hard-earned money, if possible. And there was more than enough in this segment to really stir up some really passionate thought from my side. So she basically paints Weinstein as this victim of the Me Too witch hunt, which I'm using that language to really reflect the way that Me Too is talked about by both Owens and Rogan. You'll see later on this episode. And that his accusers are just chasing fame, they're chasing money, and or they're just caught up in this movement that's really swept them away.
Well, you look like you're hanging in there. And I got to tell you, since you've been in there, the media world has changed. Definitely, I think a world that you had a lot of power in. You can see the landscape has changed. And it's a good thing because podcasters like me can have a platform to take a look at situations like yours. And, you know, my audience is very aware of my opinion on this case. I've been very clear about that. I don't find a reason to lie. I said you were wrongfully convicted before it got overturned, and I believe you are wrongfully accused, not just in the New York case, but also in the LA case.
Here's the deal. First and foremost, I want to mention that Weinstein, while one of his convictions was overturned and is currently being looked into more, he is still convicted for multiple counts of sexual assault, rape, and predatory behavior. The courts have heard dozens of women testify. Not just a few, but many brave women have stepped up with stories so consistent and detailed that they led to a guilty verdict. Now, Candace brushes all of this off. Like, Candace really, from the beginning of this conversation, really starts with, individual accusers like Gwyneth Paltrow. And that was the really fascinating one to me because essentially she kind of she talks about Gwyneth Paltrow in this way, like Paltrow kind of really fabricated this story. Weinstein specifically says language akin to, that's a total fabrication, the story. And Candace plays the clip from Howard Stern. Weinstein shares his version of the events. They're pretty much identical.
One instance in a hotel room where he made a pass at me. And then I really kind of stood up to him. I told my boyfriend at the time,
Brad Pitt.
It's a complete fabrication. At the end of the meeting, we had a glass of champagne. As I was walking out the door, I said to her, "I'd love you to give me a massage." And she went, "Yeah." And, that was it. I didn't put my hand on her. I didn't touch her. I definitely made a pass, I guess. You could call it that.
There's things like that where it's like, this is what they're saying I did. Here's what I actually did. It's just as bad. I really don't know what the goal of the conversation truly was and who walked away from that, which, reading the comments, it's terrifying. The amount of people that walked away going, Harvey deserves this and Harvey's not as bad as I thought. Before I get into all that and all my thoughts there, let's get into the actual women who testified. Because like I said, I think it's easy to straw man certain things like the Gwyneth Paltrow story for someone like Candace, who's obviously sympathetic to Weinstein, although she says in her interview that in the beginning she thought he was guilty and kind of plays into that and then looks into it and there was clearly something wrong with this case. But I want to go through the actual list of people. And again, I'll keep this very surface level. Obviously, this is very horrific and triggering and all of those things. But I will keep it very surface level and just give you a brief overview of each of these allegations. And really, again, just look at the scope of allegations. This is not Gwyneth Paltrow said something on Howard Stern and now Weinstein is, irreparably been damaged and is now in prison. There were tons of women who testified against Weinstein. And I would say women in various different social groups and classes, like everything from assistants to people like a Gwyneth Paltrow, who, I'm sorry, I struggle to see how she could perceivably benefit from a story like this. I don't think this is something that, I think the narrative that's been painted by a lot of people is these are actresses that don't work anymore and they're not successful and they're looking for a payday. It's first of all, there's way easier ways to get paydays than pursuing a criminal trial and then potentially a civil suit. First of all, let's get that out of the way. That's a huge misconception. The other piece is some of these women are very successful. Most of them are very successful, very wealthy. And I struggle to see what they would have gained from this. If anything, with certain people on this list, it has harmed their careers, speaking out heavily against someone like Weinstein. But let me go through the list here. Miriam Mimi Haley testified that Weinstein forcibly performed oral sex on her in his Soho apartment in July 2006, despite her repeatedly saying no. She described feeling terrified and numb, saying, "The unthinkable was happening. I just thought any unthinkable thing could happen. I just didn't know where it ended." Haley also recounted a second incident 2 weeks later at a Tribeca hotel where Weinstein threw her onto a bed and raped her. "In that moment, I just felt so stupid. I kind of just went numb. He proceeded to have intercourse with me and I lay there like a dead fish." Jessica Mann, another key accuser, described Weinstein's genitals in detail, saying he appeared deformed, intersex, and like he has a vagina. These details were corroborated by medical evidence and photographs presented in court. Jane Doe 1, an actress from Italy, testified that Weinstein raped her in a hotel room during the 2013 Los Angeles Italia Film Festival. She said, "My body wouldn't listen to me. I was scared he'd kill me," describing how she froze in fear as Weinstein assaulted her. Rosanna Arquette recounted an incident in the early 1990s where Weinstein, in a bathrobe, forced her hand toward his erect penis and later told her that rejecting him was a huge mistake, which she believes harmed her career. Lauren Young testified in the LA trial that Weinstein trapped her in a hotel bathroom, blocked her escape, and masturbated in front of her while groping her breast. Jennifer Siebel Newsom, who is California's first lady, testified that Weinstein raped her in a hotel room after meeting her at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2005. Sokola, a former model, testified that Weinstein sexually assaulted her when she was 16. Annabella Sciorra testified that in the early 1990s, Weinstein forced himself into her apartment, shoved her onto her bed, and raped her. Lucia Evans recounted that Weinstein forced her to perform oral sex on him in 2004. Salma Hayek alleged that Weinstein sexually harassed her during the making of Frida, including unwanted advances and threats. And honestly, her entire story around the production of that film is horrifying. And she even mentioned in that New York Times piece that she wrote that he threatened to kill her in their interaction. These are just a few of the direct testimonies. There are dozens more women who have come forward with harrowing accounts of abuse, harassment, and career retaliation. And again, to give you a list of those names, that includes Ashley Judd, Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelina Jolie, Lupita Nyong'o, Rose McGowan, Asia Argento, Rosanna Arquette, Daryl Hannah, Salma Hayek, Kate Beckinsale, Lauren O'Connor, Laura Madden, Jessica Mann, Lauren Young, Lena Headey, and so many more. Now, before we move on, I want to address something that comes up often in these conversations and every time you see a news story drop or an allegation come out on social media, and that's this idea that false allegations in relation to sexual abuse are incredibly common, and that's just not the case. There's just a couple examples. A 10-year study at a major Northeastern university found a false reporting rate of 5.9%. A review of cases reported to British police found the rate at 2.5% when there was criteria that was strictly applied. So the overwhelming majority of people that come forward about sexual abuse are telling the truth. Like, that is something that anybody who has researched this at all knows. And, it's something that's not popular. I think culturally there has been a perceived war on men that has been propagated by people who are frustrated with the way that the tides have turned in the wake of the Me Too movement. But in cases like Weinstein's, where you have stories that are consistent, there are, detailed, corroborated stories, it's just clear that, again, the courts found that these women are not making it up. So now that we have all of this context, let's dive into Joe Rogan. Actually, you know what? Before I dive into Joe Rogan, I just got to be clear, prepping for this interview, I had to sit through about 30 minutes of Candace Owens, and I had to sit through about 15 minutes of clips of Joe Rogan cackling and howling like a hyena at stories of extreme sexual abuse. I put myself through a lot doing this show, listening to all these random sermon clips and frustrating, exhausting clips of podcast bros defending predators like Weinstein. And the only way I can stay absolutely focused when I'm watching this meandering, idiotic crap is just sheer willpower. But I also appreciate my friends over at Magic Mind, who I'm thankful are sponsoring this particular episode. And I'm thankful to any sponsor that will sponsor the show, because I might host one of the least brand safe shows on the internet. But look, a couple years ago, a friend of mine who's super into health handed me a bottle of Magic Mind. It was just one of their original formulas. And he's like, bro, you got to try this. He loves supplements, nootropics, and all that kind of stuff. And look, I've tried a lot of products that claim to boost your productivity, and I am the most skeptical person ever. And most of them really do nothing. And so when I went into it, I didn't expect much. But the weird thing is, Magic Mind actually really worked for me. And like I said, now they're sponsoring this podcast, which is amazing. And I absolutely love my friends over at Magic Mind. I take Magic Mind quite a bit, and I took it before writing a script shortly after trying it for the first time. And no joke, it felt like my brain fog just absolutely cleared. I could think more clearly. I wasn't bouncing around tabs every 10 seconds, and I just locked in. But here's what makes the difference. It's not just caffeine. It's not like a shot you get at a gas station to give you 5-hour energy kind of vibe. It is a 12-ingredient stack of nootropics, adaptogens, vitamins, and antioxidants designed specifically to help with focus, calm, and energy. And I love that contrast there, is that it helps you stay calm while also giving you a sense of energy. So it's not just a adrenaline shot where you're like, okay, I'm going to do stuff, but I feel really anxious. It's very relaxing, brain fog clears, I can get to work. That's been my experience. And so recently they sent me all 3 of their formulas. They sent me their Magic Mind free shot, which is free means no caffeine, no sugar. And I don't feel caffeine too strongly anyway. So I didn't notice a huge difference between this and the regular shot. The flavor was still amazing. If you are sensitive to caffeine or want to stay back on sugar, like myself, this is a really great option. They also sent me Max, which if you love caffeine, which sometimes I do want a little extra to kind of pump me up and try to feel something in my life, you try the Magic Mind Max, which is 165 milligrams of caffeine in this little shot. And it is time release. So instead of a jittery spike and a crash, you get a steady, focused kind of energy. And then they have their OG, which is the moderate caffeine. And it's still probably, honestly, my personal favorite. I just think this particular formula is still the GOAT when it comes to something that makes me feel really good, real energized, but also keeps me feeling that sense of calm. I take one almost every time to sit down and write a script. I did one for this episode. Usually I take them before I record, but I happen to already be drinking an energy drink, so I didn't want to double up. But before writing the script, I definitely drank a Magic Mind earlier today. All three have their place depending on your needs. And I even gave a box of the Max with the 165 milligrams of caffeine to my brother-in-law, who's an electrician. He's somebody who definitely needs to be focused at work and, leaving at like 5 a.m. to go mess with high voltage wires. It's definitely good for him to be focused. He drinks one in the morning with his coffee, and he says it helps him stay sharp as well. So if you've got a packed schedule, if you rely on focus bursts of productivity to get stuff done, or if you just want to stop feeling so scatterbrained like myself, Magic Mind is worth trying. You can try it yourself right now and get 60% off your first subscription using my link and code. Go to magicmind.com/boysfm. That's magicmind.com/BOYSFM and use the code BOYS60 at checkout. That's BOYS60 at checkout. They also offer a 100% money back guarantee, so if it's not for you, no big deal. They'll refund it, no questions asked. Again, that's magicmind.com/boysfm and the code BOYS60 for 60% off. Go ahead and try it out. Okay, back to Joe Rogan. Oh man, maybe I could just do a longer spot for Magic Mind. That would be more enjoyable than going back to these Rogan clips. The reason that Joe Rogan came into this is because I finished watching the Candace Owens video with Weinstein, and off to the right where it has like recommended videos, it had a video titled Joe Rogan, I can't believe I'm on Harvey Weinstein's side. So of course, out of morbid curiosity, regrettably, I clicked on it, and basically in that clip, Rogan mentions the Candace Owens clip and basically shrugs off everything surrounding Weinstein.
I can't believe I'm on Harvey Weinstein's side.
Right?
Crazy. Like, I thought he was like guilty of like heinous crimes. And then you listen to it and you're like, wait, what?
He talks about actresses performing oral sex on Weinstein as if it's just a routine business deal. He literally mentions Whitney, which I would assume is his friend Whitney Cummings, had told him that this was something that had happened frequently in Hollywood, which, again, is horrific. It's an abuse of power. There's a lot of coercive control involved in this. And he brushes over the immense power imbalance. He brushes over the trauma, and he acts like these deals were just these savvy career moves that, women equally participated in. There's no mention of coercion. There's no mention of manipulation. There's no mention of the power dynamics involved.
Whitney told me that he would make deals with ladies. Like, look, suck my dick. I'll get you an Oscar.
Yeah,
and
be a Batman.
And they would suck his dick.
Yeah.
And he would get him an Oscar. And like, this was the thing where everybody thanked him. Thank you, Harvey.
That actually happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend Sarah Edmondson, who is, of course, from HBO's The Vow and hosts the podcast A Little Bit Culty, she recently said a quote that I think is so applicable here.
But when fear is in the room, you cannot consent. This is same thing with us, with NXIVM. When I hear the defense, it just makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest.
When fear is in the room, there can't be consent. And I think that is something people need to remember, is that, if a young actress is in a room with the most powerful man in Hollywood, that is an incredible amount of leverage. That is a terrifying amount of power for someone to have. And when there's that much fear of what could happen to you, can you truly consent to something like what is described in what Joe Rogan's mentioning on this clip, and the way he paints it as not a huge deal. And Rogan literally in this clip goes really far into say that, Weinstein, and he acts like this is hidden. This is what I don't like about Joe Rogan. is he acts like things are so beneath the surface, that there's such a conspiracy going on. And he mentions Harvey Weinstein has a major genital deformity, right?
She was talking about his testicles. He doesn't have them. Like, there's all these things that should have completely thrown out a lot of her claims. Like, she was talking about he made me hold his balls or something like that.
He doesn't have balls.
He doesn't have balls. His balls are literally inside of his thigh.
When he's 30 years old, they had to get rid of him.
He's got a terrible disease. It's like gangrene of the dick.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Have you ever heard of it?
Never heard of it.
Oh, he's got this crazy disease where your dick is basically rotting off, and which is kind of crazy for a guy who's obviously a sex addict.
Yeah.
Your dick starts rotting away, and then you still whip it out.
Yeah.
You're whipping out a zombie dick.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's a mess.
What is that actually called?
Prosecutors revealed to the jury that Weinstein underwent surgery in 1999 for Fournier's gangrene, which required doctors to remove some of his scrotum. That surgery caused a pretty noticeable scarring because of an infection. His testicles were actually taken from his scrotum and put into his inner thighs.
So you go through the reports, and they're like, yeah, he made me suck on his balls. You're like, you don't have balls.
Well, that's a problem.
And again, like I mentioned, this was a key element of the trials involving Weinstein. This is not buried information. First of all, many of the rapes and assaults happened in the early 90s, before Weinstein had surgery, and I believe it was 1999, to have this infection removed, which essentially, mangled him the way that it's described. So it's not far-fetched at all that he assaulted women in the way they described in the early 90s. And the way that women described assaults by Weinstein post-90s described this mangled genital situation that Weinstein had. And so for Rogan to act like this discredits all of these accusers, again, 80 to maybe close to 100 different people that have come forward about Weinstein, is ludicrous. And again, what helped them win this case is that women described his genitals so specifically that the prosecution could take their story and photos of Weinstein nude and say, look, clearly they saw this. This was one of the reasons Weinstein got convicted. Listening to this stuff was just disgusting. But then I remember I have seen a clip of Rogan talking with comedian Joey Diaz. And I always thought Joey Diaz was really funny. I would see him do collaborations with people, and I always thought his interviews were super funny. And I know I tell my friend, dude, Joey Diaz is so funny. Would love to see him live, all this stuff. And, he was always a raunchy comic, but there was one clip in particular where he was not joking in the context of a show, where he describes basically Weinstein-level actions that he committed himself to Joe Rogan. And I believe Brian Redband from Kill Tony is sitting with him in this conversation. And Rogan is just absolutely beside himself laughing as Diaz is sharing this story. And Diaz basically said that he was coercing young comedians into performing oral sex on him just to get stage time. And Rogan thinks it's hysterically funny. So I guess it's no surprise that Rogan would have this take on Weinstein when one of his own buddies has admitted to doing the same things. And Rogan kind of looks at that story as the girls being the punchline in this story.
I had girls sucking my dick and giving me coke from Chewy. You think I'm fucking kidding you? Fuck yeah, you gotta suck my dick to get up in the belly room. I'll make a call for you. That's the fucking gateway into coming to Hollywood. Everybody knows that.
How many girls did you have do that?
Oh, 20 of them. I had this little blonde open mic chick dog that used to come up to the Comedy Store with a 20 and just take me up to the belly room and suck my dick and go do her set. She was tremendous.
Wow.
She finally freaked out. When she got to Hollywood, bro, she was beautiful. And when she left, she had dirty fucking, her nails were dirty. And then a year later, she wrote me a letter to the Comedy Store. You sucker, you broke me. I kept shooting sperm balls in her fucking ear bar. Every time she went down, vaya pa la pinga.
So all that to say, it wasn't just this one clip of a Rogan laughing off a, assault from Weinstein. It's no, there is a perception that, the preying on vulnerable women in these industries is funny. And I think this paints a bigger picture of just the culture in general. It tends to protect abusers, especially when they're powerful men. And again, this is true in the church and it's true in Hollywood. Weinstein was cranking out movies like Pulp Fiction. Miramax was responsible for so many incredibly popular and influential films. And women who resisted him feared being blacklisted. And so the courage of women to come forward and testify against Weinstein was monumental. It's a reason that it sparked this incredible movement that is now called the Me Too movement. It's because it was a big decision. And the people who went live with us and the journalists who covered the story risked a ton. And again, when figures like a Candace Owens or a Joe Rogan or any, moron in the comment section of a YouTube video begins to dismiss the accounts of these incredibly brave women, to downplay abuse, to mock survivors, to paint people like Weinstein as a victim of cancel culture, which, like, just saying that sentence sounds so absurd. What they're really doing is they're enabling a culture that silences victims and shields predators.
And he's like, if you want to be a lead in Pulp Fiction, you gotta suck these balls in my thighs.
I mean,
it's fucking wild.
And he just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. If this happened in the 80s, they probably would have thrown it out.
Yep.
But in the Me Too movement, it was a hot witch hunt. There was a lot of people that got in deep shit.
Dude, look into the
nothing.
dude from that 70s show who's in prison for life. His appeal's coming up. Look into that one.
Really?
Bro.
It's irresponsible for people who are giving commentary like Candace Owens, who are shaping large swaths of public opinion and influencing how society treats survivors, to paint things as like these backroom deals and it's a witch hunt. Like, survivors everywhere are less likely to be believed when they come forward. We're seeing that regularly now. And predators are more likely to continue with their behavior unchecked. We're seeing the consequences for many predators being smaller and smaller, and the public reaction being lesser and lesser as it moves forward. And I guess the reason I'm so passionate about this particular topic, and I guess the main takeaway of this episode, is just that I'm always astounded at the lengths that how many people will go to extreme lengths to excuse a powerful man's behavior at the expense of a survivor or almost 100 different survivors. It's absolutely wild to me, the priority that we put on a man who has perceived power, who we perceive has done a lot of really good, amazing, incredible things. And we're willing to throw away human beings to protect that legacy. I love a lot of the movies that Harvey Weinstein produced. Like, people sit in churches where they have incredible memories being at that church, where there's been amazing events that have impacted them in massive ways. But again, none of that should influence the way that we handle very serious allegations and convictions, I might add, of sexual abuse. Thanks for sticking with me through this episode. Let me know what you think about this conversation and the narrative flipping around Weinstein to be a victim of cancel culture. Like, to me, it was so akin to a lot of the stories I cover here on this podcast of pastors where, just recently I covered one who had 15 people write letters of support after he was found guilty of pedophilia. Like, it's absolutely insane to me. It'll never make sense. But thanks so much for listening to this episode. Be sure to share it with someone who you think might appreciate it as well. And of course, my name is Eric Skwarczynski. I'm the host here on the Preacher Boys podcast. I'll see you on a future episode.